Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Julia Oshwald, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We welcome all of you. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. Guests are warmly invited to attend the Inquirer's session today immediately after the service in the parlor to learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our church in a smaller, casual gathering. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. You can also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary. Hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals are also available at the rear of the sanctuary, and a fragrance-free area is located on the right side of the sanctuary. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name is Julia, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage in First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to our forum speaker this morning is Unitarian Universalist author Carla Ernst discussing Life Without Pockets, My Long Journey into Womanhood. The chronologically gifted potluck group will be gathering today for their monthly potluck in Max Otto Hall after the second service at 12:30 p.m. Please bring a dish to share, but if unable, please come anyway. We always have enough food. Sunday's program will be presented by Rod and Sharon Depew on What's the Value of Living Longer. Plan to join us for a fun and enlightening event. On February 3rd, First Church Swans, which stands for Seasoned Women Are Naturally Social, will take the hop to and from the Pfister for brunch. To join, please make a reservation with us. No walk-ins. Today is our last day of our January photo blitz. So far, over 200 people have had their picture taken for our online membership directory. Today is the last chance to get your photo taken by Ricky Thompson, our own professional portrait photographer, during coffee hour. Many thanks to Ricky for sharing his time and talent, and to all of you for making it easier for our members and friends to connect. Please find details on these and more events in the announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. At this point, I'd like to call up Jake and Will Herman to light our chalice.
Our opening words today are by Jan Richardson, "In the breath, another breathing." Let it be that on this day we will expect no more of ourselves than to keep breathing with the bewildered cadence of lungs that will not give up. Let it be that we will expect little but the beating of our heart, stubborn in its repeating rhythm that will not cease to sound. Let it be we will still ourselves enough to hear what may yet come to echo, as if in the breath another breathing, as if in the heartbeat another heart. Let it be we will not try to fathom what comes to meet us in the stillness, but simply open to the approach of a mystery we hardly dared to dream.
Good morning. I'm going to do my best to project. I'm slightly ill. The story that I have for you today is Teacup by Rebecca Young. And the book is beautiful. I'll have it at the RE table during coffee hour. Once there was a boy who had to leave his home and find another. In his bag, he carried a book, a bottle, and a blanket. In his teacup, he held some earth from where he used to play. Some days out on the sea, in his boat, the sea was kind and gently rocked him to sleep. Some days the sea was bold, and the boy had to hold on tightly to his teacup. Some days shone bright, an endless sea of white. And other days were very dark, so dark that the boy had longed for the stars. Every day, he watched the horizon for a speck that he could follow until it grew into something glorious, but there was no sign of land. As the boy stared at the sky, an albatross cut across the blue. The way it dipped and dived reminded him of flying kites back home. The taste of salt on his lips reminded him of the sea breeze whistling through his favorite tree. The way the whales called out to one another reminded him of how his mother used to call him for tea time. And the way the clouds slowly swam into view reminded him of how things can change with a whisper. These are storm clouds. The boy awoke to something new. Over trembling seas, it grew and grew and grew. The tree gave him shelter and shade, apples to eat and branches to climb, and cozy nooks that he knew were just perfect for daydreaming from high. This is a tree that grew out of the earth in his teacup on his boat. When he first saw it, it was so very small that he wasn't certain he had seen anything at all. But before long, there was a bump, and he was on the shore. The boy was happy with what he saw. There he began to build, and he waited for a whisper. Until the day that a girl with a broken egg cup arrived, and a tree had grown in her cup as well. And they lived on that island, building a new life together. Every journey requires a traveler and a little bit of hope. For our children's recessional, we invite children and teachers to sing in verse 1 of the hymn and then proceed to class as the congregation sings you on your way. And will you please rise in body or spirit for hymn 1018, Come and Go With Me. That's in the smaller blue hymnal.
I'd like to invite you to join now in a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So take a moment and find yourself in your pew. Feel your body. Your sit bones beneath you and your feet on the floor grounding you. And the top of your head connecting you to all that is. Feel your breath moving in and out. And with it come into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Today we pray for all the people between possibilities, the people hovering in doorways and wandering in hallways, holding on to teacups on stormy seas. We send our care to those who are lost and to those who have lost a dream or a person or a life that they loved. We send our comfort for the wandering time, the in-between time, and the grieving time. We fold up our love and mail it there to the liminal space, to the long, stretching hallways between doors, to the place hearts rest and wonder. We hold our tongues on the what next, and instead send our love to the present, bringing our attention to those who need it just right where they are. May you know you are beloved. May it be so.
A year ago, I went through a very difficult breakup. The man I had been seeing for a year and a half ended our relationship because he decided he did not want to have children. I was devastated. I had planned on marrying this man, and my life felt turned upside down. I was at a point where I felt like I could just barely make it through the day at work to get back home and cry in my bed. I really felt like things couldn't get worse. Then, 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I was in shock. I clearly had not planned on this, and the timing of it, especially considering the nature of our breakup, felt ironic and cruel. I felt like every time I looked around, things seemed to indeed get worse. I had many scary doctor's appointments in that time period, all alone and afraid. And within a week, I found out the pregnancy was not viable and I would miscarry. I was reeling. I had felt loss after inexplicable loss, and there seemed to be no end in sight. I had never known such pain. In the midst of all of this, my class was observed by my principal, and I felt the lesson did not go well. Work was the one area where I felt sane and had some semblance of control, so for my formal observation and review to go poorly just felt like the icing on the cake of misery. I went into my post-observation meeting with my principal feeling apprehensive and scared, and I ended up crying out of embarrassment and pain. My boss could tell something was not right, so I told her what was happening in my life. She offered me words of comfort and ended the meeting by saying, "Well, you know what they say, it's hell in the hallway." "What?" I asked. "Well, when one door closes, another one opens, but meanwhile, it's hell in the hallway." I had not heard anything more real or true or necessary in days. I had had multiple doors close right in my face, and there was no new door opening. There wasn't even a crack of light from the bottom of a door I hoped might open soon. It was just a dark, hellish hallway. And there I was, right smack dab in the middle of it, all alone. I was in that hallway for a long time, so much longer than I expected or what I thought would be fair. For weeks I was just kind of hanging out there, learning to find my way around with the little light I had. Then, as my life started to take shape again and I began to move on, I hoped that some new door would appear, and it didn't. But I was able to invite people into the hallway with me, to walk with me for a bit, sit in the pain and darkness and hold my hand while I cried, find ways to laugh in the darkness, share a beer with an old friend and get more comfortable there. I found ways to decorate the hallway in the weeks and months that followed. I hung photos of times I felt strong and brave, drew pictures of things I wanted to do and try and be in the year to come. I tacked up cards from dear friends, notes from students, ticket stubs and boarding passes, pieces of things that proved that my life was still moving forward, even though it was dark and I did not know where I was headed. I found ways to have more light in the hallway. Communion with old friends was like candles. Improv classes were like a flashlight. Crying in these pews every Sunday was a small lamp. It was strange and painful and my path was unknown, but the more comfortable I felt in the hallway, the more sure-footed my path forward felt. Looking back now, I can't quite say when it was that I got out of that hallway. There wasn't one clear moment of truth where a door swung open magically. There wasn't a sign pointing to the right doorknob to try. I didn't walk into some brightly lit new room with my future laid out clearly in front of me. But somehow I made it out of that hallway on my own. And I learned that the next time I find myself in that hallway, which I'm certain I will, it might take some time, but I have it within myself to find the way back out.
In Richard Powers' brilliant 2018 novel, The Overstory, Dr. Patricia Westerford is a woman in love with trees. Growing up, she concocted long, delicious scientific experiments with her father, measuring trees' growth, seed patterns, an old, slow, crafty pursuit of life. Little Patty learned that, quote, human wisdom counts less than the simmer of beeches in a breeze. As certain as weather coming from the west, the things people know for sure will change. There is no knowing for a fact. The only dependable things are humility and looking. Indeed, her father tells her how the word beech, which was his favorite tree, quote, becomes the word book in language after language. How book branched up from beech roots way back in the parent tongue. How beech bark played host to the earliest Sanskrit letters. As a graduate student in forestry school at Purdue in the 1960s, 10 years after her beloved father's death, Patricia continues their experiments. But now the miracle of laboratories is at her disposal. Although she has to tolerate her professor's foolish insistence that humans know more than the forest, they teach students to manage the forest by clearing away its dead trees, not understanding how important they are to the forest's life. Patty nonetheless flourishes in grad school, nourished by the fertile loam of studying the forest she loves. She's gifted with Purdue's first prototype quadruple gas chromatography mass spectrometer and uses it to measure the gases the forest's trees produce and what those gases do to the trees around them, thus earning her doctorate. Dr. Patricia Westerford then moves to Madison for her postdoc. She researches and teaches at UWM, joyfully walking in the footsteps of Aldo Leopold. In the midst of a multi-year experiment watching sugar maples 90 miles from here, Patricia runs into a happy disaster. Some of her tree subjects are invaded by insects. She thus discovers two things. One, the trees under attack protect themselves by releasing gases that work as insecticides. This is new knowledge, but it's normal according to how plants and natural selection were understood at the time. Plants develop defense mechanisms to survive just like mammals do. But the second thing she discovers is shocking. Dr. Westerford discovers that the neighbors of the infected trees also pump out gas-based insecticides. She runs the experiment again and again, controlling for every variable she can imagine, and still the results are the same. She publishes, maintaining the strictest scientific language, using only the data from the gas spectrometer. In her conclusion, however, she can't help but extrapolate in a single sentence. The biochemical behavior of individual trees may make sense only when we see them as members of a community. When the paper gets published, quote, Patricia feels like she has discharged her debt to the world. If she dies, she'll still have added this one small thing to what life has come to know about itself. But shocking, groundbreaking discoveries are rarely welcomed in their own time. Changing the way we think about the world and how it works upends the current order. And there are a lot of people and resources invested in the status quo. After the paper comes out, folks who feed on sensationalism publish newspaper articles and invite Dr. Westerford to speak. And the folks who maintain order respond by ruthlessly mocking her, saying Patricia Westerford, not Dr. Westerford, displays an almost embarrassing misunderstanding of the units of natural selection. She loses her job and is exiled from the scientific community, humiliated. People mean well when they say things like, one door closes and another one opens. But the intention of one's words and their impact are not the same thing. Most often, saying something like that causes pain. While it's true that there are many possibilities in life and many in a person's future, and it might seem like pointing to that truth would be comforting, doing so fails to acknowledge, and more importantly, be present to the current experience of the person who's just had a door close. Getting kicked out of some reality that you loved, whether it's losing a job or a person or a dream, usually doesn't feel like an expansive land of possibility and numerous open doors in the future. Rather, it often feels like a wasteland, like hell in the hallways between what has been and what might in some future world come. There is grief in that hellish hallway wasteland. You lose something when a door closes, and despite what you or anyone else might prefer, you have to give time and attention to processing the loss. Grief has its own sense of time which won't be controlled, not by you and not by anyone giving you bad advice about another door. Grief's time is not linear or set. There is no, for grief of X, insert time Y, much though we might like there to be. There is only being with the grief, being present in the hallway as it is. In 1996, Heather Lee lost her beloved husband to lung cancer. "We were two halves of a whole," Heather told Barry Weiss in a New York Times opinion piece. She remembered the quarter of a century that they spent together as wonderful, 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 a perfect life. They lived together in Queensland, Australia, in a home by the sea with mango and pawpaw trees that they could pick for fruit and would trade with their neighbors and friends for fresh fish. But like everything, that life, that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful life was temporary. And eventually they were kicked out of the room and into the hallway of cancer. First Church's membership development coordinator, Lynn Jacoby, lost her wife 6 years ago. She shared this poem with me about their journey together with cancer. In this hallway, we are opening doors too quickly now. Neuropathy behind this one, fatigue over there. The nurse mentions hair loss, and I almost laugh. We are so beyond that concern, stepping into bone pain. Only it is not we, is it? You enter the rooms alone. Your veins ruined, your blood counts wrecked. You heaving over toilets, while I hover in doorways, hands fluttering. Still, I am here. Not near close enough, but not leaving either. Heather was not leaving her husband either, but in the end, unwillingly, he left her. His last words to her were an encouragement. "This is the time where you get to show your mettle," he said. But of course, Heather Lee was devastated. In that hallway, after the door on her wonderful life with her husband had closed, Heather started walking, compulsively at first, as she described it, walking and walking, further and further, faster and faster, and eventually walking in the hallways with time moving at its own pace. Heather started to feel better. "The faster I walked," she said, "the better I felt." When the door closed on her dream and her purpose, Patricia Westerford walked away from her old life as a professor and a researcher. After 6 months of suffering, she went back into the woods, humble and looking. In her notebooks, she quoted John Muir. "I only went out for a walk and finally concluded to stay until sundown. For going out, I found, was really going in." Patricia forgives those who mocked her, and then she dives deeply into the world's wildness and her own. She hears the symphonies of the forest stands amidst the immortal aspen groves migrating, thanks the cedar for its life-making, praises the world's unreasonableness and feels its slow-growing connections underground. Eventually, Patricia finds work as a wilderness ranger, and she settles into her new identity, accepting the wild changes grief makes to the soul, those of becoming someone new. With her new title and her tiny cabin, Patricia continues to look, watching the forest. One afternoon, she runs into two scientists tracking trees. She's bemused at first, but then one of them tells her they are 6 years into studying a single dead log. Her interest is piqued. They are scientists, yes, but the humble ones. The ones interested in looking through the longest timeline, the timeline of the trees and the earth and the decadent talking forest. One of them recognizes her, and in their conversation, she discovers that in her long absence, researchers the world over have been corroborating her findings. Trees talk to each other. They are networked together at the roots, and they talk to each other through gas at the top. And not only do they communicate, they collaborate, nursing the sick and the young among them, warning each other of threats, and sharing their resources. Patricia is pulled back into the land of living with people. Through these scientists, these people who really take plants seriously, Patricia learns to love humans. Learns she can have community with people as well as trees. She becomes part of their scientific community, still living in the forest, but also working in the lab, now doing the long, slow studies that move with the time of the forest. When a man who understands her finally comes calling, he says, "You're a happy woman." And she's able to respond, "I am now." Heather Lee's career as an athlete began 16 years after her husband's death. She was still walking, and walking fast at 85 years old, and her doctor recommended that she enter the Australian Masters Games, which is one of the largest sporting events in Australia. Heather won 4 gold medals in race walking that year. And when a journalist interviewed her afterwards, she discovered that she came within world record times. She was surprised and delighted. She committed herself to a new career of race walking. Today, Heather is 92, and she holds 5 world records and 8 Australian runs in race walking. Her most recent world record was in the 10K, which she completed in 84 minutes and 21 seconds. But Heather is not done. "I have become very competitive with myself," she said. "All there is left now is for me to break my own world records." Heather trains 3 days a week and has an interval coach, a 55-year-old woman who's one of the few people in their town who can keep up with her. Heather now sees her life purpose as helping younger people understand the importance of loving one's body and taking care of it, keeping it healthy, eating well, and exercising. She hopes to be a role model for women in middle age who are feeling constrained by age, and she wants them to know that age is no barrier to anything, really. She's excited about the year 2019 because, in her words, 2018 was an amazing year for me. 2019 will be a big one because is it going to be better than last year? Time takes its own time. New doors do and will open, but it can be hell in those hallways. Patricia Westerford was there for a decade before the scientific community caught up to her mind and pulled her back into human relationship. Heather Lee walked those halls for 16 years before discovering her new life in the walking itself. When a door has closed behind you and you find yourself in the hallway, know that there is new life. There will be. And there will even be joy behind doors that you cannot see right now. But also know that you cannot rush their arrival. You cannot speed up the grief process or make time move on your schedule. For now, all there is to be present, to receive letters from friends in other rooms, to tape up pictures of them and drawings of courage on the wall, to breathe. There will be another door, I promise, in time's own time, in your heart's own time. In the meantime, know you are beloved right where you are. Know that even if it is not we there with you in the hallway, even if we are not near close enough, we will hover in the doorways, not leaving, still loving. May it be so.
Every week, we have an opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all the non-pledged cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. Today, we share the plate with Express Yourself Milwaukee. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in the responsive reading printed in your orders of service? This is adapted from The Art of Enduring by Jan Richardson. This blessing can wait as long as you can. This blessing began eons ago. This blessing has passed through ages and generations, witnessed the turning of centuries.
Weathered the spiraling of history.
This blessing is in no rush.
This blessing will plant itself by your door.
This blessing will keep vigil and chant prayers.
This blessing will bring a friend for company.
This blessing will pack a lunch and a thermos for coffee.
This blessing will buy its sweet time.
Until it hears the beginning of breath,
Stirring of limbs.
the stretching, reaching
Rising.
of what had lain dead within you.
And is ready to return.
Will you join us in singing our closing hymn, number 95, There is More Love Somewhere?